Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a topic near and dear to everyone's heart: balance. Balance is a hotly discussed topic in just about any game, but especially the Roblox kinds for some reason. Pillar Chase 2 has some problems with balance, to say the least. Of all the asymmetrical horror games I've played, Pillar Chase is probably one of the worst balanced ones. It's a lot more fun than some of the ones with worse balance, but it's still pretty bad and it does hurt my enjoyment of the game. I think the game needs to address these problems sooner rather than later because it sounds like a lot of people are starting to really hit their breaking points with this game. Admittedly, I am too. So with that out of the way, let me walk you through how this video is going to work. I'm going to lay down some fundamental points in this video. We'll talk about the core problems of Survivor, the core problems with Monster, how they engage with each other, probably talk about maps somewhere in there, and then a few discussion segments at the end. This game was very difficult to talk about despite how much I know about it because just so many variables affect one another, so please bear with me as we go through this video. With that, let's get into my autopsy of Pillar Chase 2's balance. So, some of those foundational ideals I talked about. There's a few things about this game that we really need to make clear, especially for those that aren't as immersed in this game's balance history as others. Pillar Chase 2 fundamentally is a survivor-sided game, and it always has been both before and after the overhaul update. There is a wealth of evidence from this, from the Uncle Samsonite video being a pretty silly portrayal of it,
And my name is Uncle Sam.
to the Diamond Lobby videos made by people showcasing the highest levels of players struggling to lobby wipe even on Double Trouble, and those videos were pre-overhaul update. Many monsters are designed in such a way where they're either slower than a survivor or they have worse overall stamina economy than a survivor without ability usage. In a lot of cases, even if a monster does use their abilities, they're still going to struggle to catch a survivor, or it might be impossible to begin with. And again, this is before the overhaul update. With all the tools survivors have now, not to mention the majority of changes indirectly buffing survivors even more, and this game is now firmly survivor-sided to the point that bully lobbies exist. It's been about a month since the overhaul update, and none of this has really been effectively addressed without half measures that ultimately really result in no tangible changes, as well as weird reworks and a few quality of life changes that never really address the core issue with a monster's success rate. I have two last points to make. First, Pillar Chase 2 is not your average asymmetrical horror game. There's a lot of different players per match, and there's a lot of different moving parts during a match. The problems that Pillar Chase 2 faces in terms of balance and fun are both highly unique and as such have very little frame of reference to pull from. Secondly is that true balance should never be the goal. We're playing an asymmetrical horror game, balance is just impossible, and we're going to have to just accept that. It's asymmetrical, after all. What can be done is that the game can just be balanced in a way where it's more to help the fun factor. If we want a truly balanced game, we wouldn't be having multiple characters, multiple maps, items, or abilities. Pure balance is not the goal and should never be the goal for any real game. Balance should just be to make the game more fun than it already is.
Where are?
So, let's talk about Survivor first, as I think covering their issues makes what's wrong with things later down the line a lot more obvious. So, as mentioned before, Survivor is easily the stronger role of the two. An individual survivor can already completely triumph over most monsters, but now we have upgrades, sliding, and items to really make that more apparent. Survivors don't need these things to deal with monsters, which is pretty insane to think about. You can already deal with the majority of monsters by just sprinting and managing your stamina. Survivors in their current state are overtuned, to say the least. And even when some aspects of them get nerfed, they get buffs elsewhere that end up making them arguably stronger overall. The Oni update is pretty reflective of this, as some of the upgrades just got more fair, whereas other ones got so severely strong and punishing now. Let's go through these things one by one. We'll first talk about upgrades. Survivors don't need these to handle just about every monster in the game, so giving them these tools suddenly makes the game a lot more impossible for really just about any monster. There's absolutely two categories of abilities worth using and abilities not worth using. The abilities worth using are Parry, Energy Burst, Rewind, Invincible, and you can kind of make an argument for Cloaked. Everything else is kind of just not worth it compared to these upgrades, because these upgrades make it impossible for any monster to realistically do anything to you. When most monsters are slower than a survivor, and every monster does have worse stamina economy, it's not really surprising that the chase upgrades are the biggest pain points and the strongest ones that survivors have. I went over this in my last video, but chase power is really the last thing survivors needed out of anything in the overhaul update. These chase power upgrades are just overkill on the survivor success potential. These upgrades need heavy, and I mean heavy, drawbacks, flaws, or restrictions. What they have now isn't good enough. Honestly, I would just say remove them entirely if that just wasn't a waste of time in making them in the first place. Parry lasts for so long, much longer than any real parry should last for in any game, and upon missing it, survivors don't even get slowed, they just get a defense decrease temporarily. However, since survivors are just faster than the majority of monsters in the game, this combination of factors makes parry surprisingly hard to punish. I'm going to be honest, with how fast monsters need to kill in this game, you should just die for missing a parry. You get a defense decrease after missing it, but you should also just get slowed so the monster can actually kill you. You're faster than most monsters in this game, they can't really punish you if they're not absolutely on top of it, and because of how infrequent monster matches are, people can't really learn the timing that easily. I'm also just gonna say straight up, moves like charging demise shouldn't be able to be parried. MX should just bulldoze right through you. Parry also seems to just render you unable to deal damage for a while if you end up falling for it, so if you can be on top of a survivor and still just not do damage, cool. Invincible is also just obnoxious, that's really the only way I can describe it. Energy Burst, Rewind, all of those ones that I mentioned should be a lot more obvious in how they're just blatantly unfair, with Cloaked being the only real exception. I think it can be fine, but with the changes to survivors standing still to get more stamina back, it's a little ridiculous. And that's more so on the stamina change than it is on Cloaked. None of these abilities make chases more fun or interesting for the monster to deal with, and are essentially free chase wins for the survivor. You'll notice a distinct lack of one mechanic mentioned just now, sliding, and by extension the Super Slide upgrade as well. Sliding is, I think, the worst thing introduced in the Overhaul update. There has not been a single positive impact that this mechanic has had on the game, only negative. If upgrades are a get out of jail free card that you have to equip, Slide is a get out of jail free card everyone has in their base kit. Slide is just straight up unfair to most monsters. In a pre-Overhaul PC2, if you cornered a survivor, they were just dead, as they should be. In post-Overhaul PC2, they just have to slide through you, and now they escape, and now they have 2 chase abilities in their back pocket to help them get even more distance on you. I seriously can't stress how many interactions sliding causes a problem for. Samsonite gets hard countered by sliding. As long as you aren't caught utterly off guard and know what the slide button is, you just press it once and you get out of range of beat laydown. If Samsonite can't get beat laydown value, he's a terrible character. You shut him down in a single button press. Bone Break is also still ridiculous to deal with, as survivors can still slide. It's a giant burst of movement you cannot contest as a monster, and I can't stress this enough that just base slide is bad, super slide is... items. I never thought we'd be here, but here we are. There's really only 2 problem items, Flashbang, and more importantly, Doomfist Gauntlet. Flashbang isn't so much of a problem by itself, it's just made worse by the presence of Doomfist Gauntlet and every other ability in the game. I honestly miss when the Gauntlet was literally useless, because in its current state, it's just not fair. 3 charges on an item that renders the monster unable to deal damage and displaces them in a game where you have better stamina economy, sliding, and 2 abilities in your back pocket on top of everything else, all for the price of 18 coins per match. Look at me struggle to kill this person emoting because they uppercutted me once and locked my abilities. This item genuinely shouldn't be in the game, and at 18 coins, no less. I almost regret advocating for an increased coin cap. Like, I'm serious, Doomfist Gauntlet is genuinely just not fair. I don't know why it's still like this and has been like this for so long. Flashbang would be a lot more fine in a world where upgrades, sliding, and Doomfist Gauntlet being as strong as they were wasn't the case. When Doomfist Gauntlet was the only option survivors had and as a chase option, it was still fine, I guess. It was kind of annoying, but at least it wasn't that bad. But now we have everything else, and again, all of this together compounding on top of each other is just too much to bear. The current state of Survivor as a whole is what happens when you make a role that's already strong even stronger. The monsters were not designed with upgrades in mind, nor sliding, nor how strong some of the items are now. The game just doesn't work when you're utilizing all of the options that you have as a survivor. A skilled monster fundamentally cannot do anything against a lobby of survivors that just know how to play the game. So, with that, let's talk about Monster.
Come with us. Your destiny is bound up with mine, and with the fate of Tamriel itself.
The common method of balancing character designs for really any genre of game is to use baselines. Baselines are basically just a frame of reference for developers to look at when designing new characters. These can either be a template of stats, or an actual character within the game itself. Dead by Daylight has all their characters be faster than a default survivor and have abilities that usually help them deal with looping, regardless of their playstyle. Forsaken has the same thing. Every killer is both faster than a survivor, as well as having superior overall stamina economy. Their abilities help them get that extra power they need to be threatening to the pretty strong survivors of Forsaken. Pillar Chase seems to not really do this. I say seems because I just don't know what the development process is like. but every monster is dramatically different from one another in terms of stats and playstyle, which might sound like a good thing, and it definitely can be. However, given how some of the monsters practically don't function in Pillar Chase 2, it hasn't played out well. For example, Samsonite, Whist, Mimic, and Springtrap are all monsters that struggle to keep up with the survivors before the overhaul update, and after it, these guys might as well be useless when going against good players. Map design also matters, but Pillar Chase map design tends to just be one giant building that's ultimately a collection of hallways rather than a collection of structures like other asymmetrical games. Of course, some monsters have really good maps, but the chances of that happening are generally a lot less likely, as monsters don't have control over the maps they go on. It's typically really just trapping monsters on very small and narrow maps that are notably good. Point is, on the average match, most monsters cannot fundamentally keep up with survivors for long. In some cases, they're lucky if they even get to see the survivor. A few of them can use their abilities, but many of these monsters were not really designed with the abilities sliding in current item balance in mind. Should survivors use these well, it doesn't matter how good you are, even the best of monster players are basically put into unwinnable situations. Even outside of that, there's still many monsters that just can't handle a single survivor that knows how to position themselves and manage their stamina. The design and balance of these monsters are just all over the place, and it's still the case now. A01 seems pretty good, seeming to just have really explosive power in its transform state and could just run survivors down, and the whip ability seems like it would interact well with things like parry, energy burst, default sliding, and all of that. I think all those perks need to be gutted, but I digress. After showing off A01, we get the rework Ao-Oni, which just made Ao-Oni worse. So the damage is halved, and there's now 2 attacks. Same total damage, but now 2 instances to make up that damage. While fun, this is literally only a nerf. Not only is your damage just less consistent and harder to get, but if someone were to say, use parry or invincible on the first hit, you shut down the second hit. Ao-Oni also got a speed decrease from 21 to 20.65. I have no idea what Ao-Oni did to deserve that, but as long as Shapeshift is still fast, I guess it'd be fine. Except it isn't. In exchange for losing the speed boost while shapeshifted, which was Ao-Oni's main chase option, Ao-Oni gets a pitiful 20 stamina increase, the ability to slide while shapeshifted, and 2 full minutes of shapeshift. Okay, so if you were an actually good Ao-Oni player like I was, you know the strength of shapeshift wasn't actually the disguise, it was the stealth and chase power. You close the gap, and you play the stamina war with it if they see you, and then you attack with Oni Vision. Now that Shapeshift is just slower, anyone with eyes can see the default animation survivor running slower than a usual survivor and instantly identify you. Sledding is also a huge chunk of stamina out of you, but that's way worse for you as Ao-Oni because you're way slower overall, spending all that stamina, attacking, and wow, the survivor slid so you can't catch them anymore fundamentally, and now you're missing way more stamina than you would have by just sprinting. But you could be shapeshifted for a full 2 minutes now, a full 2 minutes where you can't attack anyone. I never needed the old duration of this in the first place, but you can now be shapeshifted for 2 minutes. That's so cool. A totally worthwhile trade-off for becoming literally unable to deal with survivors running down hallways, which is 90% of the game. And even if Ao-Oni does get close, if a survivor presses control, they're suddenly out of your range and you can't do anything about it. Ao-Oni's rework literally just made the monster worse for the current state of the game, and that sucks because Ao-Oni was one of my favorite monsters to play before it, and I say was because it absolutely no longer is. These reworks completely killed my enjoyment of the monster, which sucks because on paper, I conceptually like the idea of Ao-Oni attacking twice or having more things to do while shapeshifted. It's just, they're too weak now in comparison to how strong a survivor is. This isn't to say that every monster in this game is designed poorly or balanced bad, absolutely not. Again, I think A01 is probably going to be pretty good, and MX, in my opinion, is the best designed monster in the game, and he's the gold standard of monster designs. Or at least he was. In the current state of the game, I just don't think MX can keep up like every other monster. His weaknesses, which are what make him so fun to play against and so satisfying to play pre-overhaul in my opinion, also just hold him back way too much in the current state of the game. I also just don't want to see him get buffed significantly because it might take away the fun of him or his gameplay identity, and then if too many other things get nerfed about Survivor, he might just be too much, and it's a bit of a mess to really talk about. I can't go over every little design or balance problem with every monster in this video. That's just not realistic with the time and tools I have at my disposal. What I can say is that really none of the monsters in this game were designed for how strong the survivors are now, and they just can't keep up. I didn't know where to fit this part in, but also just like, I thought it'd be fine, but it really isn't to have monsters keep track of survivors' abilities in the middle of a match. In practice, this ends up being a pretty tall ask. Seeing what their abilities are and preparing for it while already in a chase, especially when the icons at the top are randomly ordered with a ton of bright colors, not to mention how many people are in a full lobby, it's very hard to preemptively know what someone is going to run and play around it. The upgrade icons themselves are all just white blotches that are pretty hard to identify quickly, especially if you're unfamiliar with what the perk icons look like in the first place, and then you also have putting them above the survivor in an actual chase just clutters the screen even more and makes it hard to see. The game is honestly a lot more visually messy now that it's doing that. Monster matches are so infrequent that it becomes very hard to build that skill foundation as well, not to mention some people will just not use parry, for example. You can't really bait the ability if they're using something that's just honestly kind of stronger than parry. It's not parry that's the problem, but just every upgrade, really. You're asking a lot for monsters to know what everyone is running at all times and play around it, with how many variables there are in a PC2 match compared to other games. And again, not to mention that monsters are just way out of their league already.
Oh no! Don't touch that lever!
So, my advice, I think in the current state of the game, monsters are absolutely too weak to really be threatening to most people who are good at Survivor. Survivors have a lot of unchecked power. Between timer changes, abilities, and monster balance changes as of late, this game just feels even more Survivor-sided than it did before. I think most of all too, this game is changing for better or for worse. Almost everything is going to be getting reworked at some point, and this game will no longer resemble what it did 6 months ago at some point. Is this fine? That's not really for me to decide. However, I am going to take this opportunity to propose a few ideas that I think people can just use however they see fit. Let's first establish a core philosophy here. Trickle-down balance. This is the balancing concept that if something is balanced for the highest level of play for the best and most skilled players, it will ultimately be fine when handed to the lowest skill level of players. This is because the highest skill level players really know how to break your game with what's there. Pillar Chase 2 is currently not a game like that. This game gets progressively more unbalanced the more you know about it, with survivors getting stronger and stronger as you get better at the game and get into higher skill lobbies. Pillar Chase 2 already works great more than fine in a low level lobby, it just doesn't work well in a high level lobby. That's what this game needs to remedy. We don't need to separate this game into two instances with separate balancing. That's an incredibly bad idea. Just have one experience like we do now and balance it to the best of your abilities. First, Survivor. Sliding, in my opinion, is the biggest issue. Sliding counters pretty much every monster that is slower than a Survivor. If you find yourself being attacked by a monster that is slower than you, just slide. You'll be out of their range and you can keep running, combine this with other abilities, and your chances of survival are immense. If we can't remove sliding, we need either a sizable cooldown on it, and to make it so bone-broken survivors can't slide to begin with. The whole point of Bone Break is to make survivors easier targets to secure a kill, but they aren't going to be as long as they can slide. Next, abilities. Outside of the changes I've mentioned earlier in this video to specific abilities, there needs to be build restrictions. You shouldn't be able to use Energy Burst and Rewind in the same build. You shouldn't be able to use Invincible and Parry together. Survivors with 2 chase abilities, a Doomfist Gauntlet, and the ability to slide in general are genuinely just too much for monsters to deal with. There's a lot of solutions you can take with this, and other games have found solutions to such a thing, such as Dead by Daylight having the exhaustion status effect. For Pillar Chase 2, I personally just recommend this. Color coding abilities, and you can't have more than one color. Anything that counts as a chase ability is red or some other eye-catching color, for example. I'd also recommend having a white color that has no restrictions, so you can use 2 white abilities for less impact or sillier abilities. Something like Taskmaster should be white so it can be splashed into any build. It's really ridiculous being able to stack 2 of these highly potent abilities I mentioned earlier in the video with the current state of monsters. If monsters were stronger, you can justify it, but they're not. You can't justify this in the current state of the game. Honestly, just to put the idea out there, we also might need to consider having 2 slot upgrades as well. Basically, you can only have 1 upgrade equipped because it takes up both slots, and as a balancing factor as well as an excuse to have something a bit more stronger than other abilities, it's naturally a stronger ability. As for items, certain items are going to need cooldowns on purchasing them, or they need their prices jacked way up. Ideally, these stronger or more impactful items should probably have both. The coin cap was raised, and if people want to use stronger items, they need to play more and think more carefully about when and where they use it at the very least. The even better solution is to just nerf Doomfist Gauntlet. Again, it's just too much for survivors to have access to on top of everything else they have now. The last thing, I don't think regenerating stamina while standing still is a very good thing to have in the game. The slower stamina regeneration below 30% is honestly a little iffy too, but I want to see that play out more before we judge it too harshly. The The stamina regeneration while standing still is pretty insane and counters monsters that have notable end lag on their abilities or are just notably slower than a survivor. Speaking of monsters, what do they need? Well, so far, I think the changes that they've been getting are good. Again, our goal isn't to make these guys explosively powerful, we just need to give them a fighting chance in lobbies where they have literally none. We also don't want to buff these guys to the survivors level or anything like that because it doesn't work like that, especially in an asymmetric game. However, I do have a few thoughts, and some of them will definitely be contentious. Firstly, a lot of monsters in this game do not deserve to be anywhere below 21 sprint speed, and moving forward, this game needs to be less afraid of giving monsters higher speed values. I'm not talking about 25 or 26, I'm just talking about the 21 to 24 range instead. Giving monsters low speed but a lot of stamina generally just means they're not going to be able to catch anybody. This is the state of Springtrap, for example. It doesn't matter how much stamina he has or how much endurance he has, he can't catch anyone he can't get close to in the first place. That goes for a lot of monsters in this game. At the very least, adjusting each monster's speed and stamina up more will help a lot. I can't tell you which monsters specifically need speed changes and which ones need stamina changes, but again, sliding once typically means a monster that's slower than a survivor has no hope of catching up to you, and then survivors have abilities they can fall back on as well. On top of that, the half-measure balance changes need to stop. Buffing a monster's stamina but nerfing their speed or vice versa is just silly. What's also silly is the idea of needing to rework every monster specifically to help them with the idea of looping. These monsters don't need entire reworks, they just need actually decent stats. Samsonite needs a rework because getting killed off of one stun sucks, not because he can't catch people. If we stop being scared and just slowly but surely buff his base stats, he might actually become a threatening monster outside of the very early game. I don't really think monsters need that much else to be good. Just making them a little bit faster and having a little bit more base endurance, and then just nerfing the most obnoxiously powerful survivor abilities, it'd probably help the survivor-sided issue quite a bit. Let me also put up my friend MX to further my point. MX has very moderate stats. Characters with extreme stats tend to be very unfun and unexciting for survivors to go up against, because they either get left in the dust super easily, or they're always catching up and hitting a survivor, and there's nothing the survivor can really do about it. Not every monster should have moderate stats, but I think it's just one of the many points that make MX more fun to go against than a lot of other monsters in this game, and they can follow suit in that regard. To summarize my points so no one misinterprets me, I think sliding needs some serious tweaks or needs to be removed outright. It's way too universally strong and a natural counter to pretty much every monster that is slower than a survivor, which is 10 out of 18 of them, and is still a pain to deal with even on the faster ones. Abilities need more restrictions on them and more clear drawbacks. Energy Burst has a clear downside and would be a lot more fine if you couldn't pair it with Parry, Invincible, Rewind, and other incredibly strong abilities. And the same thing goes for those abilities as well, because right now, the best strategy is to stack these upgrades that allow you to escape chases easier and nothing else. Many of these problems monsters face on being unable to deal with loops is simply a problem with one or two of their base stats. Samsonite can't deal with looping at all because he has 19 sprint speed. He doesn't need a rework to fix this weakness to looping, he needs a rework to address how unfun it is for survivors to deal with his dance debuff. This game, in general, needs to be less afraid of giving monsters higher speed values, and it would greatly remedy how weak so many monsters are to looping. There is a few questions I have for the development team, and they're not really questions I need to hear the answer to. What is Pillar Chase supposed to be, and who is the target audience? Is Pillar Chase meant to be a more casual-oriented game, or is this game meant to be more competitive? How important is the new player experience to you in comparison to the veteran experience? What constitutes a victory in Pillar Chase? I'll elaborate a bit on these. I've been around the asymmetrical horror community for a long time. When people play the power role, the killer, people tend to feel very entitled to their victories before a match even begins. Pillar Chase requires you to work pretty hard and wait quite some time for you to get to your monster match. This just causes people to be a lot more prone to frustration with the game once they actually do get there. And it makes sense as to why people feel this way about Pillar Chase. You dedicate a lot of that time, so you feel like you're owed a fun time by the game. Even casual players who insist they don't like winning tend to get more enjoyment out of winning and actually do care about winning. That's part of being human, it's okay to admit that. One thing I will give to Dead by Daylight is that there really is no clear indication in-game on what a victory is. Survivors have a binary survived or sacrificed ending, and killers have 4 different levels of rating, which really only entity displeased seems like a loss for the killer. Pillar Chase could do something similar. How would it do so? It isn't really up for me to decide. But you need to ask yourself, is this a game where the killer should have a realistic shot of winning every single round? And because the current definition of winning as monster in Pillar Chase is lobby wiping, is that something that should be able to be happening every round? Similarly, is this game meant to be more casual or more competitive? I personally think it should lean more casually, but balance is still important in a casual game. So let me just say a few last things. Please be nice to everyone on the development team, and especially Blade. He's the sole programmer of the game, and given he's the owner and kind of face of the development team to a lot of people, he gets a lot of flack. The developers are all real people, and they're mostly a friend group looking to make the most fun game they can for you, me, and everyone else out there. These people are human, and I'm sure many of them have lost sleep and pushed themselves hard to deliver the best game they can to us. They deserve respect, and they do read and listen to community feedback, whether it's good or bad. Much of this video was just my opinion on balance. Balance is a subjective thing at the end of the day. I don't really care that much about the specific nitty-gritty balance, but more so about fun, and I think the game is just too lopsided in favor of survivors right now to be as fun as it could be, at least for me. I am still very excited about the future of Pillar Chase. Artiller is right up in my alley in terms of monster design and theming, and there's plenty of cool monsters and gameplay additions coming down the line. If you want to see this game improve, be nice, be respectful, be understanding, and keep an open mind when talking about the game. And that goes for me too. If any developers are watching this video, just know you don't have to listen to me or any other YouTuber who makes a 30-minute long video whining about your game. Make the game you guys want to make, and make the game you're most proud of. If the very survivor-sided nature of the game's balance is what was intended and is the vision of people on the development team, then by all means, keep doing it that way. Everything in this video I said is just my opinion, and what I think might be good for the game. I do not envy the position of the developers. This game exploded in popularity, and it's difficult to balance. Not only is it an asymmetrical game, but it's more ambitious in terms of gameplay foundations as well, such as how many players there are in a match and the unique problems that come with it. I can't even begin to understand the pressure that some of them might feel while making this game sometimes. So again, be nice, be kind, be understanding. Rome wasn't built in a day, and Pillar Chase has a lot of plans for the future we don't know about yet. It's good to stay optimistic. If you liked this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Take care. Shadowborn tomorrow.